Ronald and Reginald Kray were iconic figures in the London underworld, leading one of the most powerful gangs known as the Firm. Many people are familiar with them from the movie Legend, in which one of the twins built a business empire while the other destroyed it. However, there was actually a third brother, Charlie Kray, who was the true mastermind behind the Firm. In this video, I will recount the real story of all three brothers and explain how the murder of a gangster, Jack the Hat McVitie, led to the downfall of the entire Kray criminal empire. Twins Ronnie and Reggie were born on October 24, 1933 into the family of a gold scrap dealer. Their father spent very little time with the family due to frequent travel, so the boys' upbringing was mainly overseen by their mother and aunt. However, they did have a male role model in their lives. Their father was replaced by their maternal grandfather, Jimmy Lee, a former professional boxer nicknamed Cannonball. It was under his influence that the twins were introduced to the boxing gym, where they acquired valuable skills that would prove useful or even vital in their lives. The difference in the twins' personalities resulted in different fighting styles. When their grandfather asked the coach about the brothers' prospects in the sport, the coach decided not to sugarcoat it and honestly admitted that Reggie had a promising career ahead of him. Dexterous, fast, and accurate in his blows, Reggie was the standout in the group. Ronald, on the other hand, had little chance. Despite having even more power than his brother, he was quite sloppy when it came to training techniques. During fights, he struggled to control the strength of his blows, couldn't properly distribute his energy throughout the rounds, and he had a great difficulty accepting defeat. All of these were significant shortcomings for a professional boxer. The twins' older brother, Charlie, also attended the boxing section, but because he was introduced to the sport at a late age, he also didn't reach for the stars. Unlike most brothers, the twins didn't hesitate to fight each other for the amusement of the crowd. Once at the age of 14, the brothers decided to take part in illegal fights at one of the fairs, where anyone could enter the ring and fight for 5 shillings. A short, bald-headed announcer served as the referee, cashier, and host. "Who's ready to try and take 5 shillings from me?" the announcer asked loudly when the fight between 2 factory workers was over. "I'm ready," came Ronnie's voice. Barely containing his laughter, the announcer asked, "Did you ask your mother's permission?" The entire audience joined in, laughing at the 14-year-old Ronnie. "Quiet gentleman, who is ready to fight the brave young man?" the announcer asked, snidely, thinking there would be no takers from the audience and the incident would be over. "I'm ready." Reggie raised his hand. The host was about to crack a couple of his trademark jokes, but he saw the furious looks on the brothers' faces. He looked at the identical twins and realized the crowd was going to love this fight. The brothers slowly made their way to the ring. As they approached the referee, the crowd cheered. Such a spectacle had never been seen here before. 2 identical boys deciding to fight for 5 shillings. The fight began and the brothers fought in the ring about equally, drawing frenzied cheers from the crowd. It's not known how it would have ended if the twins hadn't been separated by their grandfather and their older brother, Charlie. Charlie Kray wasn't portrayed in the movie, but he eventually became the brains behind the gang, and he was the only person in the group to whom the twins listened. In the film, Ronald was portrayed as a complete psycho, while Reggie had the image of a gangster who was generally adequate and sane. However, in reality, both twins had questionable personalities, with one being worse than the other, but they both usually displayed problematic and sometimes violent behavior. The only deterrent to their actions was their older brother, Charlie.
Got a little joke for you. You'll love this one. Paranoid schizophrenic who walks into a bar.
The twins' father had evaded military service during World War II. Following his example, the twins were not particularly eager to fulfill their military duty. When they were drafted into the army in '52, the brothers deserted on the first day. One of the corporals attempted to stop them, but the brothers confronted the corporal and without any explanation broke his lower jaw. Naturally, such an aggressive act didn't go unpunished, and the twins were sent to the brig. In the brig, the twins continued to defy authority. They engaged in unruly behavior, including throwing excrement at the guards, regularly going AWOL, and even once beating one of their wardens who was chained to the bars with their own handcuffs. Notably, this particular episode was shown in the movie, although in reality it occurred during the twins' first imprisonment. Ultimately, they were convicted by a military tribunal and sentenced to prison. Around the same period, there were initial mentions of Ronald's unconventional orientation. During that time in England, sodomy was deemed a criminal offense due to different social norms. Such an orientation didn't garner respect in criminal circles either. The twins didn't openly discuss this topic, but it's confirmed that upon their release from prison, they were met by their older brother Charlie and his wife Doris. Ronald immediately displayed an unhealthy disgust toward his older brother's wife. Some eyewitnesses from that time went even further, suggesting that the second twin Reggie was either also gay or at least bisexual, which was far from something to be proud of during that era. It's said that the twins engaged in a sexual relationship with each other since their teenage years, keeping their orientation hidden. These sensitive details were disclosed by the elderly gangster Freddie Foreman during an interview in 2014. While it's not known what the older brother Charlie was doing while the twins were in prison, it's clear that he had already accumulated substantial wealth by that time. With his financial support, the twins purchased a rundown billiard club and transformed it into the headquarters of the Kray brothers' criminal operations. Here a motley crew of crooks and pickpockets gathered and stolen goods were bought and sold. In addition to running the billiard club, the brothers ventured into illegal betting, robbery, and extortion, fully embracing the life of gangsters. Their organization came to be known as the Firm, and its notoriety quickly spread throughout the East End. Ronald approached gangsterism with great seriousness, treating it like a war. He even established a network of informants, consisting of teenagers who would provide information to the gang members about potential theft opportunities. It was for this approach Ronald earned the nickname Colonel.
Like Colonel Custer, Geronimo, have you ever heard of him? No.
In the movie, Tom Hardy attempted to present each of the twins in a way that the viewer could easily distinguish between them. However, in reality, the brothers often used their striking similarity to deliberately confuse others. For instance, there is a known case where Ronald shot one of his enemies in the leg. When the police arrested Ronald, Reggie voluntarily came to the station and took full responsibility for the act. Later, the case fell apart as Reggie had a solid alibi. He had been seen by dozens of people in another location. The police took the brothers' actions as a personal insult and considered it a matter of honor to bring them to justice. A month later, they were arrested again, this time for assaulting another individual of the criminal underworld. While Reggie was eventually released, Ronald was sentenced to 3 years in prison. After the trial, medical professionals diagnosed Ronald with paranoid schizophrenia and sent him to a clinic for treatment. Once again, the twins decided to exploit their physical resemblance. During Reggie's visit to his twin brother in the clinic, Ronald switched places with him. When the police arrived, Reggie informed them that he should not be tailing his brother. But Ronald didn't remain free for long. In the movie, Reggie intimidated the doctor into releasing his brother from the psychiatric hospital. In reality, Reggie assisted Colonel's escape. However, he soon realized that his brother was genuinely ill and his constant drinking while on the loose only worsened his condition. So Reggie personally returned Ronald to the psychiatric hospital against his will and insisted on keeping him there for as long as necessary for a full recovery. It is around this time the events of the movie begin. While Ronald was in the clinic, Reggie met Frances Shay. Like in the movie, Reggie was deeply in love with Frances. There's a lot of evidence to support this, including her diary. So Reggie was likely not exclusively gay as some portray him today, but rather bisexual. When Ronald was released from the mental health facility, his brothers Reggie and Charlie had already moved away from their primitive robbery lifestyle and attempted to establish what seemed like a perfectly legal business, at least on the surface. In addition to opening gambling establishments and bars for laundering dirty money, they developed a highly profitable scheme of fraud. They set up a wholesale grocery supply company that initially appeared to be legitimate. The company engaged in active operations, built relationships with suppliers and banks, and then proceeded to take out substantial loans. The goods were shipped out to the Kray's establishments, and at a certain point the company declared bankruptcy with the fake owners disappearing from view. The Kray's firm had been acquiring products and alcohol for free, which they were selling in their controlled bars and gambling establishments, significantly boosting their profitability. From one such operation, the brothers earned more than £100,000. The proceeds were using to open new legal restaurants and casinos, while providing them with nearly free goods by opening a fake wholesale grocery supply company again. And this cycle continued endlessly. One might think Ronald could join his brothers and become a respectable businessman, but that wasn't the case. At the clinic, he did make progress toward recovery and was released without the intimidation depicted in the movie. However, the doctors prescribed medication that was incompatible with alcohol consumption. As you might have guessed, Ronald not only drank almost every day but also dabbled in drugs. This led to violent outbursts, drawing the attention of the police and threats to kill his brother's fiancée Frances. Additionally, Ronald seemed to derive manic pleasure from conflicts, using force not just for business interests but for personal satisfaction. Therefore, when the firm was approached by a banker seeking protection from the Richardson Gang, Ronald was overjoyed. He enthusiastically involved the entire organization in their usual gangster activities. The Richardson Gang, led by Charles and Edward Richardson, was notorious as torture gang. They carried out mock trials for people who crossed them and dished out punishments including whippings, cigarette burning, and electric shocks. While a significant portion of the movie focuses on the conflict between the Kray and Richardson gangs, the portrayal of this confrontation can be somewhat unclear if you're not familiar with the actual history. The film stretches the final days of the gang war over several years. In reality, the gang war had been ongoing for many years, and after a shootout between the Richardson Gang and supporters of the Kray brothers, nearly all members of the Richardson Gang were incarcerated. This aligns with what is shown in the movie, but the movie portrays a significant time gap between the arrest of most of the Richardson Gang and the murder of George Cornell. In the film, Ronald is depicted as killing Cornell many years after the Richardson shootout, supposedly due to Cornell encroaching on the Kray brothers' territory. That's not really what happened. George Cornell was absent during the initial shooting and as a result wasn't arrested. The day after George visited his hospitalized friends, he decided to stop by the pub Blind Beggar. The colonel's reconnaissance worked perfectly and gave him the enemy's disposition. Ronald went to the pub with his gangster sidekick Barry. According to eyewitnesses, when Cornell spotted Ronnie, he taunted him by saying, "Look who's here." Ronald didn't respond with words, but instead calmly pulled out a gun and fatally shot Cornell in the head. Afterward, he strolled towards the exit. Barry fired 5 shots into the air and sternly instructed the pub's customers not to report the incident to the police. Originally, there was no intent for hostilities between the rival groups. Charlie had nearly persuaded the twins that avoiding bloodshed was the wise choice. However, during one meeting, Cornell insulted Ronald by labeling him a fat fat. This provocation gave Ronald the excuse he needed to declare war. As I mentioned earlier, Charlie was the most mentally stable of the brothers. Reggie listened to him and together they managed to keep the paranoid schizophrenic Ronald in check. However, over the years, Charlie found it increasingly difficult to control the twins. Gradually, Reggie began to resemble his schizophrenic brother more and more. The turning point was in 1967 when Reggie's wife Frances committed suicide. This event marked the beginning of his descent into madness, gradually turning him into a mirror image of the psychopath Ronald. The movie accurately depicts that the twins' troubles began after Reggie brutally murdered Jack McVitie, also known as the Hat. However, the film doesn't quite explain why the twins used to get away with their actions, but after this murder, all the members of the firm turned against them and started testifying against them. After the death of his wife Frances, Reggie turned to heavy drinking and was unable to manage the business. Ronald, seeing Reggie's decline, began to press him, claiming that Reggie's weakness was causing people to lose respect for the firm, which could lead to betrayal. In the movie, Ronald ordered Jack the Hat McVitie to carry out the murder of the manager Leslie Payne for $1,000. But in reality, Jack the Hat didn't derail the murder. He was just preparing for it for a long time. Ronald told Reggie that Jack the Hat had shown them disrespect, and the sole path to restoring the firm's respect was for Reggie to eliminate the Hat. In this manner, Reggie could demonstrate his value to Ronald, and the company would regain its respect. However, the opposite happened. Reggie's public murder of Jack the Hat turned many firm members against the Kray brothers. Some were even willing to testify to Scotland Yard, fearing they might meet the same fate as the Hat. The circumstances were further complicated by the fact that the twins' older brother Charlie, realizing that he could no longer manage the two psychopaths, had started distancing himself from all the firm's affairs a few months before the murder of Jack the Hat. It seemed like he wanted to disentangle himself from the situation, sensing that the music was fading. However, he wasn't successful in doing so. Charlie was sentenced to 10 years in prison for complicity in the murder of Jack McVitie. Strangely enough, many people claimed that Charlie received an unfair sentence, suggesting he was convicted solely because of his Kray surname. Some even argued that he wasn't present at the crime scene. In my opinion, this verdict should be viewed similarly to the case of Al Capone, who could only be charged with tax evasion. Society doesn't really care about the specific convictions of gangsters. What matters in this case is that Charlie was genuinely involved in all of the firm's crimes. Charlie's lack of innocence is further demonstrated by the fact that after his release from prison, he didn't turn his life around but was reconvicted for dealing drugs worth £39 million. This time Charlie received a 12-year sentence. However, he didn't serve the entire term. In 2000, Charlie passed away due to health problems. As for the twins Reggie and Ronald, they received life sentences with the right to appeal after 30 years for the murder of the Hat. The judge concluded the conviction with the phrase, "In my opinion, society deserves a break from your activities." Thanks for watching the video to the end. I hope you had a nice time.